So the meeting is called to order. Emily and I represent a quorum. And first item on the agenda, it was to approve the minutes, which Shannon had circulated to us, I guess, yesterday or today. Emily, you had reviewed those, so I had no comments. So should we just vote to approve the minutes of both meetings? All in favor?
Approved.
Aye. Okay, great. All right. Our agenda items tend to be a little general, which I think is great, gives us plenty of flexibility. But to start with our ears in the community, Emily, anything to share? Updates?
Not per se regarding sort of the development and community outreach, but I did speak with Mark Thomas, who oversees the town soccer program. And they're frustrated with sort of the lack of space in town. They've lost access to Peabody, obviously Sanborn, the field on the lower half of Peabody. The town is not permitting them to use because at some point it's going to be redeveloped. So his question for us was, do we think there's a way that they could access the gymnasium in the prison while it's sitting idle? It's a great question. My guess is there might be too many legal hoops to jump through, but we should raise that with, I suppose, DCAM just to see if there's any option for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other than that, well, I will say, yeah, so I was just volunteering at Gaining Ground this morning with my son's third grade class. And everyone's very excited about the PTG call on Tuesday. So we're going to try to get some extra marketing out for that on Instagram through some different channels. And we're really hoping to drive a good audience there so we can get sort of feedback from that demographic in town.
Mm-hmm. Great.
All I got.
Okay, I think my one update is 2 days ago, Dan and I spoke to the Historical Topics Forum that Melissa Saulfield runs. And we had a good crowd, probably, I don't know, maybe 15 people. And so we kind of did a presentation that consisted of the regular slides, plus also jumping over to some of the stuff that was shared at the advisory board on Monday, and also actually kind of went through the website with people. So that format worked really well. And I'm just trying to look at what the questions were that we had. A couple of people kind of really pushed us hard to avoid a Maynard crossing. People do not like that project. One of the most interesting comments was from a woman named Lauren Meyer, who I'm going to speak to, I think, later this afternoon. But she was part of the project to redevelop the McLean Hospital site in Belmont. Mm-hmm. And she talked about kind of how their whole process kind of linked to master planning, to zoning, and then MOUs with developers somehow. And said it really gave the town more control over the project than they had anticipated. It didn't end up working out the way they imagined. So anyhow, there may be some good lessons learned there for us. So I'm going to speak to her and just see what she can suggest to us in terms of making sure that we maximize the chance of success here.
Do you know who developed that, John? Was it, or was the contractor? Do you know if a company called Delbrook was involved in that?
Don't know. I'll ask.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I can ask her. Donna, anybody else have anything else to share in terms of word on the street? Nope. No. Okay. Well then, why don't I hand it over to Rhiannon and the team? What do you guys want to talk about?
Thanks, John. So we want to run through a slide deck that we've put together that includes our findings from the community engagement from 2 weeks ago, which Jamaica will pull up and can walk through in more detail. And then also want to talk through the approach to the community workshops in 2 weeks. Just get your thoughts on that approach, and then discuss anything that we might want to change there. We can also give an update on advertisements for the workshops. And then I think just quickly circling back, John, to the ears on the ground, your ears on the ground statement. There was a nice Bridge article about the process that also gave a plug for the website and communicated that the next round of workshops are coming up. So I feel like that was a helpful just getting the word out opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was a great story, and the photos were nice. And I think that there's a lot of we're getting a lot of I'm hearing a lot of positive feedback about the communication. It does seem like, you know, word is getting
Yep.
out, and I was thinking of maybe going to our stakeholder list just to do. I can do this after the call, but just to take a quick inventory to make sure that we are, you know, having the right level of consultation with the groups that require consultation. No, I think,
Yep.
yeah, I should have said that earlier. I think that you guys have done a great job with the marketing materials, and people know this is going on, right? We kind of have cut through the clutter.
Yeah.
So
Good to
Yeah,
hear.
absolutely. For better or worse, and Jamaica, I'll share this in a second. For better or worse, it's meant that we've had far more engagement feedback than we anticipated, and so it's taken us longer than we anticipated to be able to get you all a summary of engagement, but we'll show that to you now.
great. Okay.
Cool. Let me share screen then. Okay, awesome. So today we will kind of jump through what we heard from the first round of public workshops. We'll talk a little bit about the May 28th workshops. And then there's a couple things, the online workshop, potential pop-ups, and focus conversations that we would love your thoughts on and feedback on. These were kind of all originally in the engagement scope, but it's a quick process, happens fast. And so wondering if these still feel like the right things to do. So first of all, we are here kind of at the, maybe towards the end phase here of engagements. This is sort of the first round, which was around visioning, and then the second round is around scenarios. So you'll see that in what we previously asked people about was kind of visions for the site, and then our second round of workshops will really focus on scenarios and what's realistic, feasible, what the trade-offs are between different scenarios. Slightly more complex schedule, but says essentially the same thing, that we're about to head into this scenarios workshop now. Still doing some stakeholder outreach, and curious if you have thoughts around other people we should be talking to or hearing from. But the website is live, and yeah, the survey is out currently. Okay, so what we heard. So far, we have had outreach to key town stakeholders. We are currently sharing postcards that will go around town and allow people to know about the second workshop, as well as get engaged in the online survey. We had 2 public workshops sort of stacked on top of each other, one at the park, one at the community center. We've had over 1,900 website visits, which is great. We have websites for other projects. I will say that is a pretty big number for a project website.
That's amazing. And how much time are people spending on the site? Do you have
That's a good question. I could look into that, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
But we could break down. We have Google Analytics set up, so we could give you an export of what that says and where they're going on the site.
Best thing you just said is that's a lot more than you see for a lot of other projects. So
yeah, it's a lot of engagement. People are excited, and we can also see where they come from as well. So I can kind of give you all an export of that. But from the community workshops themselves, we had about 118 people sign in. Not everyone signs in, so we estimate that to probably be around 150 attendees spread across both sections of the workshop. So far, we've had 21 people online. That will stay open for a little longer, so that number can also increase. And I think when these postcards go out too, it'll be a good reminder for people to take the survey. We had over 248 sticky note comments, which is a lot of feedback. There was a lot of feedback on the Rotary and Warner's Pond, were sort of the 2 biggest hot button items around, how this project will relate to those 2 ongoing projects. There was a lot of curiosity around housing and types of programming. I think people see a site, especially when we were at the park and we were so close to it, and they want to get right into what's going to happen on it and how feasible that programming is. So I think there's a lot of excitement to move into this second round of scenarios engagement. And then there was mixed feedback on preservation. I think it's a complex site, and there were some people that said tear it all down, start new. And there were some people that had a lot of feelings around preserving specific elements of either the warden's house or the wall. So I think that is an element that we'll continue to work together with the community on. And to be honest, we might not come to a clear consensus on that one, but it might be involved in the several scenarios at the end that we propose forward, might have differing opinions on preservation. But there was a lot of interest, regardless of what is physically preserved, in the creation of a museum to sort of tell the story of this site. And then in general, people were really appreciative for the opportunity to learn about the site, be involved in the process, and we're excited at both of these events.
Can I ask you one question about the survey? I actually sent an email to Justina earlier today asking this, but I don't know if this is intentional or not, but when the question will say, what should we focus on? Or then they'll have like, 6 to 8 options. You can only choose one. As opposed to, so they're radio buttons, which require one versus like check boxes. And a lot of the questions to me feel like things where you should be able to indicate interest in more than one of the responses. And so I wonder if that actually might make it a little hard for people to complete the survey.
Yeah, that's the point.
I would take a look at that. And then the second suggestion is, can we put just a big link right at the top of the homepage to the survey? I know that little box pops up when you visit for the first time, and that takes you to the resources, which allows you to find the survey. But if we could just have a link right at the top of the page to the survey, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. I think
I was going to suggest about that box that pops up. I don't know if you can edit it to also say, because it says like, did you miss April 30th? Join us on May 28th or whatever, as well as the link to the survey.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Both of those are possible. And in terms of the choosing one, we can also edit that to allow more choices. My guess is when it was set up, there was an idea to try and make people prioritize, but I understand that sometimes there are multiple priorities, so we can edit that.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, so now I'm going to go through a little bit of high-level feedback from each one of the kind of tower stations that we had, because each one was asking pretty specific questions. So a little bit of quantitative feedback over here, and then we've started to pull out, there are just a ton of great quotes and comments that I think we'll continue to use throughout this process to highlight what, in their own voice, what the community is saying, but we've pulled some important ones over here, but you will see these pop up in future presentations a lot, I think.
But before you jump in, there's one question.
Yeah.
Will you be able to make the raw data available to the advisory board if you'd like to see it?
I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something we have in a Google document that we can.
Yeah, we have one spreadsheet that just has multiple tabs that relate to each of the activity types, and then also includes. So we're going to try to capture it by each kind of wave of engagement.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can share that with you.
Thanks.
Okay, so under community and culture, when it says like 40%, that's of the 248 comments that we received. Respondents prioritized more attainable housing. 40% is of the community and culture comments. 40% of respondents prioritized more attainable housing. This was also, in general, the most talked about thing among all of the comments and the conversations we had was housing on this site and how affordable it should be, who it should be built for, at what density. Housing was definitely the biggest topic talked about in its entirety, but 40% of the community and culture comments talked about more attainable housing. 23% supported options for aging in place and a range of housing sizes to meet diverse needs. In terms of buildings and structure, 30% of the comments suggested showcasing the site's history through a museum, public art, or interpretive signage. So that seems pretty important to people. There was also interest, again, in affordable housing and a hotel, knowing that this is a area that has a lot of tourism and there aren't a lot of hotels in town. So how do we capture some of that tax revenue as people are visiting the town? An environment and open space. We asked about future amenities that people would like to see on the site as one of the dot sticker activities. And 33% wanted natural spaces, 18% wanted walking trails, and 17% mentioned a community center. And there was very strong support for restoring pedestrian access to the river. So on the western side of the site, letting people come through the site and be able to access that portion of the river and linking it to the rail trail. In terms of transportation and access, 25% of the comments were about the Rotary or Route 2 and access off of Route 2. I think there's a lot of confusion about plan changes here and how this process fits into that. I'm sure you all have heard that too as you're talking to people in the community. So we just kind of need to make sure that we're saying that this process is parallel but could influence. And so we're not the DOT, but we have ideas about what the best use of that is for this site. In terms of energy and infrastructure, there was a lot of interest in reuse of the wastewater treatment plant and curiosity around what that would mean for the town. And then a lot of people mentioned sustainable building practices. There were a lot of comments around, can this be a net zero development? How can we better create resilient and sustainable buildings and really be a showcase for the town?
Mhm.
We asked about Concord's sustainability goals in this section as well. And the ones that people thought were most relevant were direct attention to mobility and a focus on natural resources. So being able to tie those back to town goals. And then in economics and feasibility, 42% of the comments highlighted wanting mixed use development or adding amenities that enhance the town. So thinking about this as a public space and how can this future public amenities add and contribute to the town ecosystem as a whole. And there was a strong agreement. There were a lot of comments about keeping big box stores out of Concord and protecting the West Concord businesses that are nearby.
Question about on the economic side of things. Did people talk about concerns about growing tax rates and affordability of town on that front and the impact this might have on kind of town budgets and economics for taxpayers?
I personally heard some conversations around seeing this as an opportunity to get tax revenue. And maybe keep tax rates down. That this is an opportunity for that. I don't know if there were that many direct comments around growing tax rates to support this development. I didn't hear those.
Same. It was mostly how can we use this site as a chance to expand the town's revenue to alleviate the pressure on residents.
Awesome. Thank you. I like these quotes too.
Awesome. Any other questions before I get into, I'll talk a little bit about the vision activity that we did, but any other questions around these 6 pillars?
I guess I'm just curious, just in terms of communicating all of this. So we'll share all this with the community, and this is kind of the synthesis of all those 248 post-its and everything else.
Yeah, I would say this is sort of the headline synthesis of those post-its. On the May 28th workshop, I think we'll have a large board that dives deep and maybe provides a couple diagrams or sort of charts of this information. So for instance, when this says 25% of comments, we might have provided a chart that shows all of the comments tagged, So this is more the big headlines, but we're provide a little bit more detail on the.
But it would seem that so when we get to the point where we're actually talking about, even beyond scenarios like, okay, so what are we going to advocate for on the site? The planning board, I know in their comments suggested that we kind of filter kind of the mix of uses through the Envision Concord 2030 plan, right? So look at those goals. All this feedback we get from the community would then potentially be like another filter or another screen through which we run those ideas, and because we'll want to be consistent with this stuff, right? But
exactly.
Okay, that all makes good sense. Thanks.
Yeah, and we'll love we have one more activity that we want to run through, but John and Emily, we would love your thoughts on how to, whether or not we think that the next workshop activity helps to get us closer to a clear understanding of what people actually want to see on the site. So we'll talk about that.
At the workshops, we sort of had these project characters or sort of project vision ideas. We asked people to make their own sort of pie of what percentage of the site they'd want to see each one of these in, following a very similar activity we did with the advisory board. So what we came to was that they're actually pretty similar. Both the advisory board and the public, you'll see this purple here. We had active and artsy combined when we did the activity with the advisory board. We pulled them out for the public workshop, but together they almost sort of equal the version of that. It seems, you know, we're maybe a little bit over a quarter, right at around a quarter for healthy and resilient, but overall these aren't drastically different, which I think is a good thing. It shows there's a little bit of consensus among both what the advisory board thinks and what the general public thinks. That being said, the takeaway might be a little bit of everything is what this site wants. You know, there's not one that's really rising to the top. We did hear from a lot of people that healthy and resilient is sort of a baseline for all development to happen. And we heard that both from the advisory board and from the public. But it seems in general that, you know, we want this site to do a little bit of everything, and be healthy and have some mixed use and be supportive, and also, you know, contribute to nearby West Concord arts and culture scene.
So others in the public workshop chart, so that you called out housing and commercial spaces, that was generally the most common theme in other?
That was the most common one that was others. When we send along this spreadsheet, you'll be able to see what all of the other comments were. But that was the biggest one, was a specific call out for housing in commercial spaces. So upcoming engagement milestones. Survey 1 is live. We will coordinate survey 2 happening with the second workshop so that people can attend or still getting the content, able to comment. The website is kind of continually being updated, and there are people commenting on the map that's on there currently. We've been sort of monitoring that in the background to see what they're saying. And then we were thinking about, we can talk about this more as we get to the slide, but whether we still want to have these community conversations and whether those feel important. You know, they were originally outlined in the scope that they might involve specific topics like transportation or history, or, you know, open space and environment. If we want to deep dive into any small group discussions around those topics, and that still feels relevant or important to do as a part of this process.
So that on the website where it says TBD for those dates, are those discussions?
Yeah.
So remind me, when and where might those happen?
We were thinking, and there's a slide about this later on, but we were thinking that those would happen the week or 2 weeks after the second round of public workshops, and that they might happen on Zoom or virtually, to give people a chance. Yeah, it can be hard to come out to an in-person workshop, but that might be a small group discussion over Zoom around kind of dedicated topic areas.
Good, and that's good. Yeah.
Okay, so diving in from one workshop to another, we're back at it and have a couple thoughts around what is going to happen. So we are proposing, the sun is setting later, that both workshops happen at the park. It was an incredible location. It was beautiful. You could see the site and the natural, you know, pond nearby. And so you were able to have a lot of conversations around, you know, what's going to happen right next to where we're standing right now. We do have a rain location, which is the Concord Townhouse, but we will sort of reintroduce the project. I think we might even keep some of the intro boards around history and timeline that we had from the first workshop. We'll do a sort of section around engagement synthesis, and then we'll have 3 scenario stations. So we'll describe in more detail the 3 scenarios that we're developing now. And have feedback questions around those. I would think of those as maybe similar to the 6 topic area stations that we had before. Sort of you can read them and interact with them on your own time. And then we were proposing 2 activities, which I'll go into more detail on some following slides, around trade-offs, which is essentially a build your own site activity. Can be a really large map of the site, and we talk about programming and how it might fit onto the site, what the trade-offs are between different programming types. and then a vision activity, which gets us a little bit to the like qualitative component, like what is the experience you want to have on this site in the future. So like the trade-off activity is great to be able to learn, you know, what is feasible, how we're going to get there. But I think there's also a component of what is the experience you want to have, you know, in 10 years walking on this site. So that gets us a little bit of that. So the welcome sign-in table, we might have another icebreaker activity like we did at the last workshop, where we, you know, have a name tag and people pick maybe one of the topics they're most interested in discussing. Then we'll have a sort of welcome and list of stations orientation when you sign in. And
Can you
then,
hold, just go back one?
yeah.
One of the things that, so I was at the welcome table
Yeah.
at Euro Park. And one of the things I thought we could have done better was to make sure that everyone kind of knows what they're about to walk into.
Yeah, okay.
So like, as you said, a lot of people did come by the table. Some just walked in directly.
Yeah.
I think you set it up so that they kind of have to go past the table. And I'd almost, you know, some of the people thought there was going to be a speaker of some kind, and I think people enjoyed it. But I'd almost like maybe like have people go in like maybe every 5 minutes, let a batch of people in or something, so that everyone has to have like the orientation speech. Here's what you're about to experience. This is where it came from. These are the activities you can do, just so they have a sense before they get in, as to, you know, what they're about to experience. Just so a little more structure up front.
Yeah, we can do that. Since we know where we're going to be too, sometimes we'll make a little floor plan, you know, that's like that's on one of the welcome boards. That's like, these stations are right here. So when they're looking at the space in front of them, they sort of know what they're walking up.
That's a
into.
great idea.
So
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
can do that as well and give a little bit more orientation to, happening. So then we'll have a series of project orientation boards. Again, these will be fairly similar to the ones that were at the previous workshop, you know, talk a little bit about the site, the schedule. We'll have some boards that are around the engagement. So the things I just presented to you as high level takeaways, and how to share feedback in other settings. So survey, online. If we decide to move forward with these focus conversations, it's a great place to promote those. Say, you know, if you want to talk specifically about the Rotary, meet us on Zoom in 2 weeks here, you know.
Mhm.
And then we'll have a series of scenario stations. So there will probably be a little bit of intro that we do, you know, how we got to these scenarios, how we got here. And then we'll have the 3 scenarios built out more fully. I think we'll have team members sort of next to each one of those 2 to be engaging in conversation. We'll have feedback questions on those. And I think those will end up taking a form that's very similar to the pillars that we put around the park. So I think those will be sort of things you can walk around in, you know, 3-dimensionally around, and be able to have conversations about what's on them and directly engage and touch them. So then the 2 activities we're thinking about doing, and these are sort of preliminary ideas, so would love your thoughts on whether you think these are asking the right questions. But we might have like an assemble the future development mix of MCI. So it'll allow participants to understand, you know, relative costs and timeline and community benefits of different development programs. We've been thinking about these in buckets of maybe, and so this mirrors a little bit the Lego activity that we did at the advisory board, but is a little less about density and more about trade-offs of different types of development. But we've been thinking about them in terms of residential, commercial or light industrial, public park, and then either community or institutional. So what we might do is have a large table, and we'll have sort of an abstracted version of the site. I don't know if anyone has ever played Minecraft, but sort of it might be squared versions, you know, of the site. And we might have some chips or cardstock that is color coded to be these 4 things. We're thinking that this will be pretty big maps, so you might even be able to play out a scenario with a friend or with the person next to you on the table. And then you would lay these out onto the site as squares. So it's sort of an abstracted version of the site. And then each one of these would have an associated cost value, might have an associated developer attractiveness or community benefit, and then it might have a time frame, you know, and so the goal is you'll sort of play this out to be the vision you want, and then you can sort of total it at the end and see if you're fiscally adding up, but also maybe have more community benefit. And you can talk about the trade-offs of those. So somebody might want, you know, all park, which is great. That doesn't have any developer attractiveness, but it does have, you know, more community benefit. And it might take a little longer to build than residential, which is sort of, you know, the easiest to build in the current market that we're in right now. Same thing for commercial and civic. We've been playing around with the idea that maybe you can also like buy more components. So maybe we've done this a couple of times where you poker chips, you know, and if you want to buy more park, you got to have a little more money. So we've done it where we've abstracted that into either chips or a dice. We met with our engagement consultants yesterday. Oh, Maurice is on the call, and we talked about maybe there's even a dice that you throw, and if you land it, then you get a grant and you can, you know, build something else. So it's a little bit like there's also the chance of chance in this, you know, maybe you'll get a huge grant or a huge endowment. Somebody really wants this to happen, and then you can go crazy. So trying to gamify the feasibility of this and talk about trade-offs.
And this is you're kind of seeing things a little bit before the rest of the advisory board. We met with Patrick and Dan last week, and then shared with them a refined approach to how we're thinking about the scenario. So we're kind of stepping back in the scenarios and trying to more directly communicate the factors that will need to go into identifying what is possible on the site. And that's what, as Jamaica had shared, that is what those columns are the upfront costs that the town has to take on, the fiscal impact to the town of that program mix, you know, what will actually get a developer on board, how will it, like what types of programs or places or destinations will it have, you know, back to the point about providing more soccer fields, that type of stuff is embedded there. And then how long are people willing to wait for this to happen? Because each one of, you know, some of the programs could take 10 years, some of the programs could take 30. And so that is, you know, we're essentially translating what we're going to share with you all on Monday into a simpler format that the community can also use to understand trade-offs too. Because I think what we did hear a lot of in the public workshops were folks saying, you know, well, I just want this to be a park. I just want this to be a place that, you know, is entirely for the town to enjoy. And that's great. I think we would love to see it be that. But it will come at a significant cost to the town to make that happen. And so we want people to understand that with eyes wide open going, you know, as they participate in this exercise.
So can you just take us through as an example? So the top row, residential, just narrate that. So as you go across that
So
row.
You'll do this first part where you'll have these little squares and you'll fill in your box. So maybe it's yellow, 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 you know, residential all along here. Maybe I line park here, and I have some community or institutional here. So then you'll count the number of boxes you had. So it's a little bit of a post-evaluation matrix. So you'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes of residential, you know, 2 boxes of public park, 3 boxes of community. And then we're still figuring out exactly how to tally this, but you'll get sort of, you know, times the value. So that'll be $3 signs or something, and all the way across. So you'll end up with, you know, six hourglasses down here. Maybe, you know, some of these are minus. So there's less upfront cost, you know, then this might be plus. So you get more tax revenue from that. And so you sort of add up your little dollar signs, can add up your stars, and then you have a number of hourglasses at the end. So you'll sort of know relative cost. You'll make this much from it. You'll spend this much on it. You know, stars to community benefit is 3, could be 6, you know, and then hourglasses are how long it'll take.
And just to make sure I understand the columns. So I'm going across, I'm pointing to my screen here.
Yeah.
So residential, number of boxes, I get that. Then value is minus $1 sign. That means it's kind of expensive or kind of costly to the town, but not as costly as a public park.
Yep, exactly. You're
Can you
reading that.
make the screen a little tiny bigger to just zoom in on that a little bit more? Sorry.
Yeah, and I'll say this is not fully baked yet. So we threw this in as an example. Some of these dollar signs may not be exactly
Okay,
right.
yeah, no, just, okay,
Or
that's better, thank you.
there.
So again, so if we go across that residential example, town fiscal impact is plus a dollar sign. That means it's slightly positive, meaning
You
tax
get
revenue.
some tax revenue off of it, exactly.
And so you get, but commercial and light industrial gets $3 signs because you get more.
More tax revenue off of that, yeah.
Okay. And is there anything that talks about kind of like the net tax revenue after the cost of servicing these different models?
That is a good
So, for
question.
example, I mean, the thing I think I want to be sure we're really,
Yeah.
and I think that John's probably going to focus on this, but I want to be sure that we kind of take into consideration like the full system cost, if you will, of all these uses, right?
Yep.
So I use this example, some people in our calls, you know, if Amazon came in and we turned this huge thing into an Amazon distribution center, there'd be virtually no cost to the town to support that whatsoever. Whereas if we built 5,000 housing units here, we're probably gonna have to build some schools and do some other stuff that might not happen right on the site, right? I just want to be sure that the estimates of impact we have are really for the full system cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jamaica, do you have the scenarios slide deck? Do you want to grab that? I think it might be slide 14. We'll share this with you all this afternoon ahead of the Monday meeting, but maybe you could pull that up.
And John, building off of that, like, you know, just our footprint, like building to net zero, like, I don't know how, if you can incorporate that. I mean, some of these comments, right, are pretty, I think I saw one quote, let's see.
Is this the one you're talking about, Ree?
No, I am talking about the slide after.
Okay.
Just thinking like the quote that stood out to me, like the site should be net zero or better.
Yeah.
What's the cost of that?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great idea.
That's a good question.
Yeah, Emily, that's a great idea. I think we could definitely include that. And what it could mean is it's kind of like what Jamaica was saying, that it's like bonus that helps offset some of the other costs. So these are the draft metrics that we were imagining. Maybe actually, Jamaica, do you mind going 2 slides prior to this? Just so this is just like super briefly. We're just circling back to all of the different scenarios that we can imagine. This is where our team had started, but we realized we hadn't shared this with the advisory board. So this is what we're going to walk through on the 19th. And then forward 2 slides after. So it's like there are all of these different ways you could imagine program mix, and then to another slide. And then here are the ways that we can start to understand both like town feasibility against developer feasibility, and then other kind of like considerations that we need to make there. And so this is you know, we're working through these right now and just making sure that they are right. But from here, together with you all, we want to evaluate 3 scenarios, and that's what we're going to take through to the end of January 30th. And so we will continue to delve into more metrics with those 3, but for the purposes of just getting to keeping things simple and getting to like which ones do we want to explore in more detail, took this approach. And so John, your questions about you know, understanding more deeply all of the different cost implications of all the different scenarios, we imagine that we would do that once we start to land on the 3.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
But then if you go to,
what you're trying
yeah.
to do is take something incredibly complex and distill it down to, I mean, I like the way that you have the colors and the relative size of the boxes and the different, you know, scenario options. That's all very intuitive.
Awesome, great. Yeah. And so I think once we, it's always trying to figure out the best way to communicate it to people who have, and this is us talking about the public workshop, communicating it to people who have very, very diverse perspectives, very, different ways of thinking, trying to kind of make it something that is easy for anyone to engage. And I think the same, we're trying to just take it through the lens of a kid. And so that feels like the easiest way to get people to weigh in and see which scenarios are starting to land for them.
Yeah. That being said, though, there will be this activity we're imagining is pretty well facilitated. So I think there will be a member of our team right there talking about placement of program, and if there are more detailed questions, we'll be able to be right there and answer them. So
That's great.
not a singular activity you do, on your own.
As we think about sort of the flow of the three different activities here, can you go back to that chart? Because I'm wondering, like, is there a best place to start? Like, do you start there? Do you start, like, I like how you said, okay, like, we're walking through, like, what do you want our experience to be walking through this site in 10 years? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to think of, like, do you end with this fiscal analysis? Does it matter? You can start anywhere. I don't
That's a
know. I'm
good
just trying to
question.
think of, like, would it help conceptually if you followed sort of like a path?
Yeah, I think we were thinking that they would run through the scenarios first. So
Yeah.
they would sort of see the three we're exploring as a baseline, but it's a good question around whether you do this trade-off activity next, or the other option we had is this vision activity. We've done this in the past as Mad Libs. That might be the right, we're still trying to figure out what the right version is, but you sort of think about what is the experience, the adjective I want to see or have right now. And so this is
Maybe if you're doing the sort of, I'll call it the trade-offs, or this one, your vision activity may be different, right? Because like if you vision first, you're gonna be like, I want all of these things, and versus like, oh wait, I realize I can't have this if I want this too. So maybe that's like an exit activity. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. I'm sure people are going to go wherever they want anyway.
Hard to make people go in any sort of predetermined line at open houses, but it's a good question, and maybe we do sort of steer them towards vision first. That way they don't come in too jaded.
Right, but I think this is what we should be telling them as they come through the entrance gate, right?
Yeah.
Here's what you're going to be able to do. We strongly recommend you do this piece before that piece.
Yeah. Great point.
John, I hope you're planning to be there to help us.
I'll be there for sure.
I will be able to get this one. So
great, amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is the second activity. It might end up as a Mad Libs. We're still trying to figure out what makes the most sense for this site, but we have used that in the past, and it's often really easy for people to engage with.
My impression is that the trade-offs is substantive and really important. The vision is kind of fun and light. And so if someone's going to come in, I'd rather have them spend 80% of their time on the trade-offs and 20% of the vision. And doing a Mad Lib is like, everyone knows what that is. That's fun. I think we get some good stuff out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll also say that what we've learned so far, and you can tell us if this is a mischaracterization, that Concord is a town that deeply desires facts, but leans into feelings, and so we're trying to do both.
Okay.
What a
very interesting characterization.
Nice way to say it.
Say that again. You said deeply desires facts, but leans into feelings.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So that's the in-person workshop. Any other questions about that? And then we can kind of go through the couple other things that are related to that, but slightly separate.
Great.
Oh, great.
Okay, so the online workshop, we are still figuring out exactly what this will look like, and I think it depends on where some of these materials land for the in-person workshop, but trying to replicate as much as possible. It will be the following evening on Zoom. I think instead of having the scenarios where people can walk through on their own time, we'll have a short presentation that summarizes the scenarios in kind of talk format. and then we might, depending on how many people join the Zoom, split up into kind of breakout rooms and walk through some trade-off activities over a Miro together. So we might, have our screen up and be putting blocks onto a site, and then doing the evaluation as a matrix together. And then we'll also maybe have an option for polling that does a similar vision activity from people. So trying to replicate the same thing, but on format.
And we'll want to make a survey too. So we might direct them to the survey at the end as well.
And I'm sure breakout rooms, someone from agency will be in each breakout. If possible, it's like, because I found in one of the meetings I was unable to go to in person, I was in a breakout room and I was contributing a lot, right? Like I want to make sure sort of if you can have like a plant in the breakout room, right, to sort of get people going and talking a little bit that's willing to share ideas, because sometimes I think people can be tentative to speak up in there, but
yeah, that's fair.
See if like the advisory board is planning to attend that.
It's a great idea. It's also always useful to hear things firsthand. So if as many advisory board members as we can get to come to one or the other meetings, I think it's just great for them to be able to experience and understand what people are feeling.
Linda, do you have a hand raised?
I was just going to make a suggestion. When we did the similar exercise, it was really difficult to figure out did we get exactly how many houses on what area, et cetera. And I wondered if you could have just little calculators or whatever, so that when people put things in the squares, they immediately see where the dollar signs go, and then they can kind of play around with back and forth iterations. And I think if you had that immediacy to it, they might really get the idea of this is how the economics work, as opposed to arranging everything and then having to add it up at the end on paper. So I don't know if you can get that many little pads and or whatever, but I think that would, I just think people would find it more of a game too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we could put them directly on the squares, maybe the time stamp, the dollar signs. So like as you're placing the square, you see it on the color. That's a great suggestion.
Linda, were you thinking that we could even have iPads where people use kind of slide things around and it automatically does the math?
Well, I wasn't going to take it that far, but yeah, I think that would be great. And tell everyone to bring their children because they'll love it. No, I just think we devoted half an hour plus to that exercise. Here you're going to get 10 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
So I think if you have that back and if you're lucky, maybe 5 minutes, if you have it quickly calculate and make it visual. Yeah, if you could do it all on an iPad with colors and everything, that would be super. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We can think about how to incorporate that. Not sure if we can get it on an iPad, but we can definitely make it clearer and easier to.
You could. We could talk about this, but I would think that you could if we could get some laptops there, you could kind of put that, put your box with the math on it just into a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
And you could put it directly into a spreadsheet and boom, immediately you see the answer.
Or even a Google form or something. Could we do a Google form? Yeah, I think we could probably do that. The challenge with a Google form is that it won't calculate it in the moment. You would see it maybe at the end. But yeah, we can try to figure that out.
John,
Something must exist.
I don't know, does the schools have laptops or tablets or something? Do you think that we should see if we could potentially borrow we probably wouldn't be able to do both, but I feel like they maybe have some that we could bring to the evening session.
Emily, do the elementary schools still have like laptop carts? Because I think now in high school, everything is one-to-one, so everyone has their own laptop, but
Yeah, so like middle school, everyone has their own laptop. I know at Thoreau, they don't have them, like they go to a library and use computers. It's worth asking. I can send a note to the principal of Thoreau.
That'd be great to know.
and when my kids were in elementary school, Emily, they used to have these carts with like, 20 laptops on them, and the laptop cart would come into the classroom and they would use them for, I don't know if they still do that.
They don't have them anymore.
Okay.
I thought you were gonna talk about when you were growing up, you used to use like a slide ruler or something.
No, it was it was called an abacus.
Yeah.
Those, yeah.
Actually, an abacus might work where you're just pushing beads over,
Actually, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, we'll think about that. That might do exactly what we want here. Okay, so then the next element of this is pop-ups, and I'll say, oops, sorry about that. This is pretty open-ended. So this slide is sort of, are there potential times and locations that you think are important? Are there big events that are happening in town that it would make sense to coordinate pop-ups with? Are there members of the advisory board that want to pop up? Do you want some of us to come and pop up? I guess this is maybe a feasibility question of whether you think these are still important, or if we feel that we're getting enough turnout and kind of hosting an online version of this too might get people out.
I've thought about this, and I'm just worried that there's such a wide variety, like it could be just hit or miss, right? You're planning to go to a pop-up at the high school or Emerson Field, and it's a rainy day and people don't want to stop and talk, or they're running late and they're running to the next activity. So I'm sort of leaning away from pop-ups is my 2 cents. If anything, I feel like, do we offer a few more community Zoom sessions, right? Or do we say, okay, we need to do another, in-person activity event in June that's, has some more structure around it. But that's my 2 cents on the pop-ups.
Emily, would there ever be a world in which, I think Peter had suggested that he would, if we gave him, a stack of postcards that he could hand him out at church, would we ever just like give the advisory board members like a stack of 50 postcards and say with the QR code to go to the website and say, Emily, you're, out and about with your kids at a soccer game, or like you have something else that's happening. Can you like be responsible for just like handing these out? Would there be willingness?
Yeah. And I even think like you could go around to the stores in West Concord, right? I go to tea cakes every day.
Yep.
The stack of tea cakes, I could bring some to Thoreau School.
Yep.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
You had given us, I believe it was your suggestion, Emily, you had given us the suggestion that we could see about mailing out postcards to all residents and businesses in the town. And so we did confirm that with the printer, and they are deploying that now. And so everyone will get a postcard to their home. It just that the postcards won't go to homes. I think they should get there 3 to 4 days before the workshops. But that's also happening.
Linda, did you want to add something?
No, I think the West Concord Discover Day is tomorrow. It's Saturday. Sorry about that. That would have been right. No.
Well, I do second Emily's opinion on the pop-ups. I think that I love the idea of handing out, first of all, the townwide mailer. That's great. At that point, no one can say they weren't contacted about the opportunity to provide their input. But I think giving advisory board members a stack of postcards to hand out just in their travels around town is great.
Okay.
And I think drive everybody to a survey that we really feel good about. That's going to capture what we really consider to be the most essential information. I think that's really I think that's probably the best strategy to get the most input.
Great. We will.
the way, it'll also make it easier on you guys, because instead of having to try to synthesize all these other kind of unstructured but creative exercises into like quantitative feedback, a survey, I think, can be even
Yeah.
more effective.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, so then it seems like we are leaning towards focused conversation. Oh, sorry, Linda, go ahead if you had something else.
I'm just seeing that the West Concord Porch Fest is on June 14th. Just FYI. That might be worth it because it's in West Concord.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Because
all. Sorry.
Yeah, if nothing else, at least making sure that all those businesses are stocked, ahead of that.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Okay, so it seems like we are leaning towards focused conversations that might be on Zoom, and they would happen, we're thinking, either the week after or 2 weeks after the second workshop. They would be about an hour long. And it would be an opportunity for the public to kind of dive deeper into a specific topic area that they've got questions about. So we're thinking that, this should say 4 topic areas, but it would be maybe transportation and mobility, and we would invite the civil engineers on the team, maybe some other people in town that are involved in the Rotary or something. So it might be like sort of an expert panel of this on the site. And there would be a series of sort of panel questions that would be asked, maybe a short, couple slides that are specifically about the options for the site, and then site legacy and transformation. So this would be a little bit of the history, maybe some opportunities for interpretive signage or museum work on the site. Development opportunities would probably be based on fiscal options. So we would have Landwise from our team maybe lead a conversation that's a much deeper dive into the potential development opportunities on the site, and then maybe one around environment and open space. And we could invite somebody from the pond task force, or kind of combining projects that are going on in the town and sort of relating them to one another in a sort of structured panel discussion. And,
Well,
and we'd
I
open it up.
love these ideas. And I think we could really, some of these topics overlap with committees we have in towns, like we have a transportation committee in town.
Yeah.
So they could almost, we should involve them, be sure they're not only invited, but kind of let them speak a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I wonder, should we have one on housing? Housing is everyone's top topic to talk about, right? Should we have one to talk about the different styles of housing that are possible and
Yeah, I think it makes sense. We can talk to Landwise and see if it makes sense to have housing and development, or whether maybe it stands alone on its own. I know they're so interrelated, but maybe the focus of that one is housing. We can circle back with them.
I also think potentially we could just, you'd asked about personnel issues related to an earlier idea. We could assign members of the advisory board to host one of these, right? So I think we have plenty of people who could do it, right? So I think these are a great way to really have much deeper discussions, and I think the community will respond well to these. So I like the idea.
Cool. We will work forward then to continue to develop these ideas and land them. But we would love to get in touch with committees that are involved in these topics and make sure that they feel a part of the process and have a chance to speak.
So Shannon, maybe as we develop this list, you could make sure that these guys know which town committees might be logical contributors.
Yeah.
To the. Let me ask one more kind of broader question. We're now getting into mid-June with these things, right? The project ends June 30th.
Yep.
Is there a point after which further input is really just, we're not going to be able to do anything with it? Is it too late? In other words, I don't want to be doing things that generate content that we really can't act upon, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if we had an option of these 2 weeks, we would prefer June 2nd, but realize that, schedules line up and things are complex to schedule. It's also the week after a holiday. So, I don't know if that's an easy.
But I mean, I just thought the idea, why couldn't we have one of these next week?
That's a good question. I think we were hoping that we would be able to come out of the second workshop and these would be framed around, like, we've done all of this community input. We've heard from you on these things. And so this is a little bit of a summary. It's like not quite as much an opportunity for input, but more, we've heard your thoughts around these topics. And here are some people that are going to deep dive into, you know, the technical components of this.
Also, I'll remind us that the week of June 2nd, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th is town meeting. So that taps a lot of town committees in particular also.
Yes.
So maybe, yeah, June 9th is that. In terms of an end cutoff date, feel free to correct me, but I think somewhere around mid-June is probably the.
Yep.
Okay.
Or sorry, yeah, mid-June, yeah. So.
Okay. No, I think these are a terrific idea.
Okay, I think that those are all the slides that we have for today. This has been really helpful and informative, so we'll take these and continue to develop them. You may see some iterations to this content on Monday, but yeah, any other questions about engagement or thoughts?
Nice. I'll share one more comment. One of our participants in the Historical Topics Forum said, it's been 2 weeks since the thing at Giroux Park. Why is there no content about it on the site yet? You know, where are the results? And I said, well, you know, there's a lot of stuff to work through. I said, well, I'm sure your consultants can get something done in more than 2 weeks. This is a, you know, I don't know how many people really think that way also, but I do think it would be good for us to post something, you know, immediately after. We should be ready to put stuff onto the site, say, here's what we shared on the 28th. And to the extent that we aren't sharing any results, to even say, you know, we expect to post results by a certain date. And then at least people know that there's more coming. And I think that'll respond to that concern.
Yeah, we definitely can. I think this last one, you know, we had a lot more comments than we were expecting and a lot more people. So it took a while to filter through, but I think we'll be a little bit more prepared this one. We're aware this is popular and we're kind of on deck, are ready to put something out, but we can work on that. And maybe, yeah, make a note, you know, check back on this date for takeaways. We can add that to the site.
Fabulous. This is great.
Great. One last thing, John, do you want to send another email out to the various stakeholders list that you had sent out for the May meetings, or sorry, for the April meetings?
Yep.
Okay. Do you want us to? Sorry, go ahead.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll draft something and send it your way.
Okay, super.
Great.
All righty. Well, that was great, agency. Thank you. Okay, I think that probably brings us to the end of our agenda. Just check here.
John, one thing I neglected to mention at the beginning, I'm working with the school committee to reschedule the meeting with Dr. Hunter. So
Okay.
hopefully that will be in the next week or so. An agency team, I'll keep you posted on that.
Actually, that's a good reminder. I do want to go back. You know, the legislation does instruct us or require us to, you know, consult with, there are like 8 different organizations. I think we've gotten to most of them, but I'll just do a little check to make sure that we have. And if we haven't, then we should be reaching out to them. But the schools, I think, is such an important one. So I'm glad you're doing that. Thank you. Okay. If we're done with our agenda, then is it time to turn to public comment? I see one member of the public here, Lee. Do you have anything you'd like to comment on?
No, I came in a little bit late, but I think that I'm impressed with the way agency is going about this. And I think the sort of casting as wide a net as you can to get input from all kinds of people, regardless of how much they may or may not know about the topic, is important. And John, I particularly like your comments and agree with your comments about the cost, the cost implications of some of these land uses, which are not necessarily seen on the surface, but are hidden. You know, the tax base, whether or not the fire department's going to need another truck if we end up with more housing or ambulance service or all of those, and they're very important. I mean, I, for one, would like to see more commercial development on the site. I think Concord really needs a stronger commercial tax base. Affordable housing and housing is obviously always desirable. But in fact, contrary to, I think, Jamaica, something you said, housing is not an obviously easy thing to build these days because of construction costs and land costs. So to the extent that the town or the state will be subsidizing land costs here, could make this a very advantageous place to put housing. But I think that's in direct conflict in some ways in my own mind about the need for more commercial tax base. But thank you for asking, John. And good work, agency. I second John's comments.
Thank you, Lee.
I'll even give you a look at me for a moment. So there I am.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, good to see you all again. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Sure.
Lee, please come to every meeting and continue to say such positive things.
Well, I'm impressed. I know how difficult this is, but you guys have really managed to corral it all together in a very cohesive and organized and understandable way. It's really well done.
Well, on that note, I think probably adjourn the meeting unless anybody has any other last minute items. Okay, agency, thank you. Donna, thanks for coming. Shannon, thanks as always. Emily, Lee, we're adjourned.